All right, let's take the derivative. Let's find the derivative of this function. This is number 9 in section 3.6. Again, this may not be exactly what you have, but should be something very close to your problem number 9. And so when we think about it, there's a couple ways we could do this. Certainly, I've got a product of functions of x, and we remember the product rule, the derivative with respect to x of a product of two functions, u and v. Derivative of u times v plus u times the derivative of v, right? So we've got that down. Please remember the product rule. You just can't take the derivative u, derivative v, and multiply them together. That will not work. What I'm going to do is I'm going to treat x to the 10th times e to the x as one function of x, and cosine of x as another function of x. So this will be like my u down here, and this will be my v. So I'll take the derivative of u, derivative x to the 10th e to the x times v, which is cosine of x, and then I'll do u times the derivative of v, right? And so let's start here. What's the derivative of cosine of x? What's the derivative of v function? Well, you should know from this section 3.6, the derivative of cosine of x is negative sine of x. Now, what about the derivative of x to the 10th times e to the x? Well, guess what? That's a product as well. We have a product rule within the product rule. So we're going to have to use product rule on this again. What's the derivative of x to the 10th power? That's just a power rule. Bring the 10 down, x to the 9th power times e to the x. Okay. And then plus what? X to the 10th times the derivative of e to the x. So what's the derivative of e to the x? Well, the answer is the derivative of e to the x is just e to the x. All right, so the derivative of x to the 10th e to the x is right here in parentheses. Okay, so I've got my derivative is this stuff in parentheses times cosine of x plus this product of these three things. So let's just clean that up. Here I'm going to take the cosine of x and I'm going to distribute it through, right? Since I'm multiplying it by this, I'm going to multiply it through this, right? So I get 10x to the 9th e to the x times cosine of x when I distribute it there, plus x to the 10th e to the x cosine of x. And then this negative sign comes out here to be minus x to the 10th e to the x times sine of x. And here's my derivative, which this is fine. Answer for me. If you wanted to, you could factor out x to the 9th times e to the x and write it this way. But I think this answer right here in the box is sufficient. Now, some of you might remember in the lecture, I talked about finding the derivative of a product of 3 or more functions. How's that look? Well, here's the product rule for 3 or more functions. We prove this. Essentially you have, like I showed up here, a product rule within product rule in this case. But if you do it all the way out, here's what happens. If I have a product of f times g times h, the derivative of that is we take the derivative of the first function, f, times the other two, plus the derivative of the middle function, g, times the other two, plus the derivative of the last function, h, times the other two. And that's true for, if you have 4 functions together and you find the derivative of a product of 4 functions, you'll do the same thing. You have 4 terms, right, where you take the derivative of each individual function in the product, multiplying it by the other functions. That's the way it stands out. So if you go back to this problem we just did using this formula, here I'm going to let x to the 10th be the function f, e to the x be the function g, and cosine of x be the function h. Well, what's the derivative of f? What's the derivative of x to the 10th? That's 10x to the 9th times g times h. And then f times what? F is x to the 10th. What's the derivative of e to the x? Well, it's just e to the x. There's g prime. Right, there's g prime. Here was f prime. And then g and h. And then f and h. And then here lastly we take the derivative of h prime. Well, what is the derivative of cosine of x? It's negative sine of x. So that's why this plus becomes a negative, right? So the negative sine of x, there's your h prime times the f and the g. So if you look at what I have written right here, it's the same thing I have written up here. Okay, so you can use that shortcut in the product rule for a product of 3 or more functions together that you're trying to find the derivative of. All right, I hope this was helpful.